Well, now, I don't know why I didn't die that either, but that would be well, you just push the button and if you tonight, I think it's one of my favorites. But they should have talked about it.
Thank you so much for coming today. Welcome to our first program of Summer Reading Club. If you haven't signed up for Summer Reading Club, you can drop by the information desk under the question mark anytime. Doesn't cost a thing, you just need your library card, and you'll be entered to win a whole bunch of different prizes, and our grand prizes are Kindle Voyage e-readers. So anytime you read a book or attend a program, you can earn credit for an entry into the prize drawing. So I'm going to send around for those of you who have or will sign up for summer reading, just put down your name and your library card number, and we'll get you entered in our prize drawings. So today I'm excited to have Joanne and Rebecca Moore, who are going to tell us all about the surprising fashions of Civil War era women.
I've been asked more than once every time I do this program, well, what's so unusual? What's so not ordinary? Well, first of all, as I've talked to people and studied history, I particularly enjoy women's history 1840 through the Civil War. And most of my life I've lived on the prairies, and so that's where my biggest bulk of knowledge comes from. But now that we're here, I've been working with listening to people at the Civil War Roundtable, at Dr. Nichols over at the university. A lot of people have been very helpful in sharing more of history of this area. And that's what if any of you have books or diaries or anything to do with women's history of this area, please share it with me, because that's what I'm trying to learn, and that's what I want to be my specialty area now that I'm here in this part of the country. So why is it unusual? Well, most people, when you talk about ladies in the Civil War, they flash in their mind the great big plantation ball gowns and someone helping them dress and pulling their corset tight and doing their clothing up so it's spotless. Well, as you'll notice when we start holding things up, none of these are ironed. Now, I know how to iron, ladies, believe me. I grew up ironing. But that would not be appropriate. If I came to you with every single one of these items ironed and starched and looking absolutely, you'd say, oh, is that real? Well, it isn't real. So as we show you things and do a few little quick changes here and talk about things on our table, you'll begin to see why. First of all, what was this country when it was first settled? Swampland. All right. I really have enjoyed making trips out to the Cypress dog trot house. And I've gotten a lot of information about that from Dr. Nichols, because they didn't live with a lot of dry, high ground around them. They didn't break sod like we did in Iowa. They lived in water. They had wood slats that they tried to go from different areas in their, quote, ground to their homes. Now, like I said, I'm not the expert on this. I'm the learner, but you may correct me or share it any time that you like. But when you think about that, would you want to wear a hoop out in the mud? Now, I grew up on a river in Waterloo, Iowa, and my home more than once was flooded. And we had to go from our home to higher ground in boats. So I have a little bit of an orientation of what some of that might be like. I also was a pastor's wife, and our first churches had no well. We had to carry water for 3 days at a time and carry it to the church. I had to make sure I separated water for what it was going to be used for, so I kept my children healthy. So some of that I do have a little bit of an orientation to, but not like the women of that day did. So the first thing that I have on is an apron, and we'll talk about, Rebecca will do a lot more of the talking than I can do anymore. But she'll talk about the gauging, and after the program you can come up, and none of this is anything you have to wear white gloves with except the hats. We'd prefer you let us show you the bonnets. But the rest of it, you can pick it up and look at it. Gauging was a method of pleating. And so we'll talk a little bit about that more now. But anyway, aprons were worn a lot. So I'm going to take off my gown, my apron, and show you one of the first things. Now, if I told you I was going to put on a fashion show for Civil War women and put this on, what would you think? My glory! Well, this was a typical work dress. And if I was working, should we go around in front of the table? If I was working out in my yard, whether it was muddy all around me, and I was going to cook snake for dinner, I might not have this long skirt on. Instead, I would have a shorter skirt on, and my shorter skirt, you would see my pantaloons. And all I have done, stand up if you can. I can't move around very well, so you'll have to move around to see me, maybe. But anyway, that would be a typical work dress. Now, you stop and think a minute. Would you want to go out in your garden and work with a hoop skirt on? Corseted up, and first of all, you probably couldn't get corseted up unless you had somebody help you tie it in it. When Rebecca and I do Civil War reenacting, and it takes both of us to get corsets on each other. So that is one of the unordinary fashions. Not only that, the women didn't have a wardrobe of 8 or 10 dresses. They were lucky a lot of times if they had one garment. And so, if someone came riding in and you wanted to at least look appropriate because you didn't want your ankles to show, you might go in the house and have another skirt. Now, I have a picture of a barn loom. I would love to own it, but the lady wanted way too much for it. But anyway, it was a huge loom that sat in the barn that they wove their clothing fabric on. I do have a loom that is 32 inches wide that I could wind and weave fabric to make fabric for clothing for myself. So even though they could buy fabric and it would come up the river and it would be very large boats, it would only be probably 30, 32, 36 at the most wide. It would be 20 yards maybe on a boat. So they could have fabric. You'd buy a boat, and when it came, you got whatever you got, and that was it. And so I could have enough fabric to make me one top, 2 skirts, and take some of what was left over to put on the bottom of my pantaloons.
So if you actually pull it up, you can see where the white is.
I'm surprised to see how full the skirts are. A lot of extra fabric there.
Yes.
How much so that's 20 yards and all
No, this
that?
isn't 20 yards. A typical long skirt. Now, she could put this over a hoop skirt under it if she wanted to. But typically, the skirts were anywhere from 90 inches circumference to 120 is what a typical hoop is, 120 inches. So it takes about 3 yards of fabric to make your skirt for like that.
And it depends upon how tall you are too, because it takes me 5 yards of fabric to make a skirt, because I'm so much taller.
When we plan a dress for her, we plan 10 yards for her. When I plan one for me, I plan about 8. So I'm shorter armed, I'm shorter in height. My waist isn't, my waist through here isn't as long as what hers is, so that's pretty much about what it is.
And everything you see up here made, I've done some of the work, but Rebecca has made all of these items, including all of the bonnets that are over there, all of the underwear. Thank you. I'm a proud mama.
Yes.
Excuse my ignorance, but
No.
is the 9 yards, is the width of it standard?
Well,
Or is it
we're
just
using
modern?
modern fabric, so
Yeah.
our fabrics are 45 inches wide. And my skirts are a little bit probably fuller than what originals are, just because it's easier for me just to go salvage to salvage. I don't cut down and make 36 inches and cut off that extra. So, but their fabrics were only able to weave, generally 36 was the rule of thumb for the width of their fabrics. And that held true up through like the 1920s when things got even more mechanized and bigger.
Do you want to start showing the
Sure.
different
So let me
clothing?
start. So we've kind of talked about the unusual a little bit. Since we're kind of on work dresses at first, this is another work dress that, and kind of you can see it's not quite so wide and full. This is a work dress that was worn by a lady named Wanda Wyatt that it is a exact copy of her dress from the museum in Wisconsin, the Historical Society in Wisconsin. And it does have a pocket in it. A lot of people don't think they had pockets, but there is if I can find it. We can find it later. There is a pocket in the dress, and this is a one-piece dress. A lot of work dresses were one piece. It was easier to wear, more practical than having the two pieces together, layered over top. So, and this dates from about 1848. So this is a little bit pre-Civil War. Now, the one thing with Civil War fashions too is that all of the arms are piped. There's a little bit of piping in every armhole and the arm side. And they also were...
Why piping?
Piping helped reinforce that stress and the stress. It also gave a little bit of a decorative to it. When prior to the Civil War, fabrics were pretty much all, at least here in the United States, were pretty much dark because they had to dye them with natural dyes, and the dyes didn't last over a period of time. The other thing, if you get into quilting, that I know some of my quilter friends are here, what you had to set the dyes with would eventually erode away the fabrics. And over time and light exposure, it changes the color of the fabrics. So everything was pretty dark. Everything was pretty much like what they call a homespun, which would be a solid fabric. They could do a plaid by different colors of thread. This is what is typically known as a homespun, even though it's a plaid. It's not like a polished, real polished cotton look. So this is a typical work dress. And it's attached just because of the ease of being able to get dressed in and out of it, move around. You don't have to worry about your top coming up and exposing, what you have underneath. And you can pretty much function and get your stuff done. This is an item called a wrapper. And I can slip this on. This is actually hers, so it's going to be kind of long for me. But they button down the front. This is what typically was a house coat. So it's also gauged across the whole back to get your width in.
They're all totally lined, everything's lined.
Yeah, everything's lined. This doesn't fit me as well because it's almost too small for me because it's hers.
And they did line them?
They did line them because it helped with perspiration, absorbing the perspiration that you have, and trying to help keep the outer fabric that you maybe spent more time in weaving, or you maybe you actually purchased it. It helped with that. So,
Rebecca, did you make that too?
yes. This is a trim. They did a lot of self-trimming on clothing with the fabric that they had. So that's another reason why, if they bought a bolt, they would, you might make yourself a dress as your mom, as the mother. If you had a little girl or two little girls, with the rest of that, you'd make dresses out of that same fabric. And there are pictures out, I've got some pictures saved on off Pinterest, and there's of actual some more photographs that there's a mother and like 3 or 4 little girls of different ages. They're all in the girls are all in the same dress, like identical dresses. And so they'd buy a whole bolt of fabric and then they make clothes for the whole family. You might make a shirt for your husband out of the fabric and a dress for yourself. So but this was kind of like their house coat. If you weren't feeling well a particular day, if you had morning sickness and you didn't feel like dressing, you might wear something like this.
Also, this is something that the more affluent would wear.
A lot of times in some movies you see them like sitting up in their sitting rooms and they don't get dressed until noon. Or if they're in their, I'll say, womanly time of the month, they might not get dressed at all. They might not even come down at all for 3 or 4 days. If you were, say, like in the South or out East or something and had some servants that could wait on you, you would wear this as your house coat all day long. You might put on a nice petticoat to wear underneath of it. And you can tell this is like too long for me, but then you would button it down to like here, and then you just wear the rest unbuttoned, okay?
And Rebecca and I made the petticoat.
Yeah.
That is lovely.
Yeah. Needs a little repair to it, but it is what it is. So, and that's one that we made for her. If you had a close friend, you weren't feeling well, and you had some people come to visit you, some friends come to visit you, you might be just in that, and you'd receive very close friends upstairs in your sitting room. So, and this was acceptable, but you didn't receive gentlemen or men in this at all. You would have to dress. This is an actual, this is a child, more of a child or young lady's chemise. This was worn kind of like a slip, what we'd think of as slip nowadays. This is an actual one. This is the one that I made for myself. You can see the same kind of a pattern to it. Hers has a little bit of a gathered sleeve, kind of a line. It sits off the shoulders a little bit. You can also wear this. I can actually wear this under a ball gown if I wanted to. So, and that's why they always were pretty much like just right on the shoulder. They didn't really come up the neck. And then, so you would have this on. This is my pair of pantaloons, they were called. Drawers was a term that came in later after the Civil War. And you'll notice, what about them? It's kind of shocking to think that it's not closed. But this is how they wore them. It's very practical, for one. If you think that you're in, okay, say you're out east, you are in your dress, you have this under it, okay? If they are closed, and you have this on, you have your chemise on, these are under your chemise. Your chemise comes over like this, okay?
Take you 3 hours to go to the bathroom.
Exactly. And what else? You're going to need to have somebody help you go to the bathroom, right? So then you have your corset around you, and your corset's going to come around like this, okay? And you're going to be all cinched in. It's easy just to drop your drawers, right? The other thing that we don't think about is they didn't have really public restrooms like we do now. We don't have a McDonald's. They didn't have a McDonald's. They'd go in and while they were out doing their errands or shopping or whatever, that they could go in and use the restroom. If you were out shopping with your friends for the day in town and you needed to go to the restroom, you had to go back home. Okay? Or if you were with a friend maybe that lived closer to town, all of you might go to her house, if she's a close friend, and you go to the restroom there. But your restrooms aren't inside, okay? They're in an outhouse. Even in the most fanciest houses, they were in an outhouse, okay? They did, some of the very, very eccentric, very rich people might have a porcelain pot that maybe fit in an apparatus they had somebody make that resembled a chair, so you could use that. But that was very, very rare, okay? So you pretty much had to go to the
Outside.
outhouse out back. Or you, in this area, you really literally just picked out a tree. Okay. And that was another reason why, men are always like, why do women always have to go to the bathroom in pairs? Well, that's why you went to the bathroom in pairs, okay?
And you protected one another. You talk about your big skirts came in handy because if you were with a friend of yours, then you help protect them and they then help protect you. So that no one could come around and catch you unaware. So the skirts were more than good for one reason.
So, and this is a typical corset, 1860s typical corset. This front piece down here is called a busk, a B-U-S-K, and it was an invention that came about around the 1840s actually, that allowed women to be able to get into their corset by themselves. It was revolutionary for women. You still have ties in the back, But now, with this, once you have it on, somebody ties you in back here, and you get it set to what your body is, then you can just undo it like this at night or whatever, and then you can easily put it on by yourself during the day. You know?
Did they make those things?
Mhm.
The women
Rebecca made
Mhm.
both of these.
So this one's way too small for me, I can't wear it anymore. But it basically sets about like that. If it's, situated there, then you can snap it in front. So, if your husband was at the office, he might put you in it, at the beginning of the week after you washed it, and then you just let it kept where it was in the back, and you could get in and out of it as you needed to, through the week and stuff. So
Or
that's
like
kind
me,
of-
you just didn't wear any.
Yeah, a lot of women didn't even wear them, especially older women, because they are constricting. Now you have to remember that you started wearing these from the time you were a small child, so your body was conformed and didn't really grow so much. You'd grow as you needed to, and they'd make you'd get a new corset, but you didn't really have a lot of the, growing and stuff like that. You pretty much stayed in a size as you became an adult your whole life, for the most part. So
We
that's
need to move on.
that's
honey.
kind of the undergarment stuff. Now this is a typical day dress, and this is what everybody thinks of as a Civil War dress. It has the hoop skirt underneath of it, and then you wear at least one petticoat to cover up all of the hoop boning, because this was actually whale boning in the beginning, and you would cover that up to get a nice smooth effect over it. And you might wear 2 or 3 petticoats over that too. Sometimes I wear at least 2. I wear at least 2, sometimes 3. In the winter I might wear 3 if I have a cotton dress. This is a dress that is, this was kind of toward the end of the Civil War, about 1863, 64. This is a skirt that is just what they call knife pleated or box pleated. This dress doesn't have anything at the back to fasten it. We just use a straight pin, because they use straight pins. That's all they had. They didn't have safety pins. Safety pins hadn't been invented. They had buttons, but if you were older, you might not be able to manipulate the buttons as easy. A safety pin or a straight pin was easier, so you might straight pin yourself in. Some of the older, there's accounts of some of the older ladies that were older as they went through the Civil War, because they didn't have buttons, and as they were growing up, they weren't used to them, they didn't want to change, so they just always pinned themselves in their clothes. But the skirt on this is a little bit elliptical. If you can see, it's a little bit higher. If I hold it this way, maybe you can see it. It's a little bit higher in the front than the back. Okay, so it kind of swooped out the back a little bit more, and they did make some different hoop skirts for those. This one has a peplum. Peplums became popular throughout the Civil War, so this one has a peplum to it, and comes around here at the front. So that's with tassels. This was done off of a plate, photographic plate of a lady that was in a dress similar to that we did. This is a typical skirt from the 1850s. Fashion changed from 1840, 1850, things changed a little bit. They got a lot of layers to the skirts. Their bodices changed a little bit, their tops changed a little bit. This is these few through here are a little bit more fancier. If you were maybe a little more affluent, you might have something like this. If you lived out east, you might have something like this. It's all
Did you
snaps,
make
there's
that?
no buttons.
Did you make that?
Yes.
Every
The
single thing
wristband.
she's showing you, ladies and gentlemen, she made.
It's basically called a gathered bodice. It all
Well,
fits
this would
down
not
here.
be easy. This is
No, it's not.
That's why I asked.
And all of this is sewn on.
Yes.
Machine or hand?
I do the clothing by machine. Some of the application is by hand. All of the gauging around the skirts, on the aprons, things like that, that's all done by hand. The pleating's all done by hand.
When does a sewing machine come into existence?
There was a sewing machine that was, they were invented about the latter half of the 1840s.
But your average woman would not have one.
Correct. Your
So
average
she
woman
had to
would
be good
not.
at sewing.
Yeah,
Or
your
not so
average,
good.
your average woman would have had to sew these garments all by hand.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
A sewing machine at the time cost around about $100, which was quite a little bit then.
Yes.
The first machines were very expensive. As the patent for the machine, as they built the machines and people learned about them and other inventors looked at them and came up with their own idea, there were a lot of different machines out there available. Singer wasn't actually one of the first ones made, but he was one of the first ones to mass produce it because his motto was that, you know, there should be one in every home. So he was one of the first ones, though, to start mass producing, and that lowered the price a little bit, and women were able to afford them a little bit. The first sewing machine did a chain stitch. I don't know if you're all familiar with what a chain stitch is. And then as machines were perfected and even more mass produced after the Civil War, in the 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, they became the interlocking stitch that we know them today. So
Chain stitches like you used to have on your flour sacks
well,
and
you
everything.
still do
You
like
just
on the
pull
dog
it.
food sacks, where you just kind of pull it and it all comes. So it was, you know, it held your clothes, but a lot of people still hand sewed things. Now I didn't have, I mean, when we first started, some of these I had to make like within a couple days, so I didn't have time to sit and hand sew a dress. That is a goal of mine. I do want to hand sew a couple. And I have, for about, 15 years, I've been looking around I've always wanted a machine from that period that did chain stitch. And I was able to do some searching on the internet, and I found one, and now I've found out that they're out there a lot more than I ever thought that they were. They're pretty prevalent out there right now. And so I do have a machine that was manufactured in 1849.
And she had that in her display.
Yeah, we had a display out here. I don't know if any of you saw it, and that was in the display. And it's a goal of mine to make some dresses for us off that machine. So, to actually really get back more to the pure way that they made them to be able to show people. So this is another